Hi, welcome to Elementary Music with Donna. I am Donna Rhodenizer. I want to talk to you today about creating a soundscape or a sound story with the story Sam and the Beanstalk. I've created another video where I actually tell my version of Sam and the Beanstalk, and you can go listen to that. But this video is intended to be teacher to teacher, talking about some teaching strategies and tips that go along with creating a soundscape or the sound story for Sam and the Beanstalk. The first thing that you want to do when you are creating a soundscape and adding students playing instruments or using body percussion is to know what those instruments are called and how to play them properly. Because when you're starting to do that soundscape, you don't want to spend any time trying to correct, oh no, that's not the way you hold this instrument. So I'm going to show you a couple of the instruments that I use and talk a little bit about how to play them. And this is the same kind of process you would do with your students in a class before you ever get to the soundscape class day that you're going to do. This is also a great opportunity to talk about timbre of instruments that change due to what material they are made out of. They are going to be different depending on what you use for a mallet on a xylophone, for instance. If you have a yarn-covered mallet, a plastic mallet, a wooden mallet, those will all make timbre changes to that instrument. And you can talk about vibration when you're looking at these instruments. So there's actually, you could probably spend 2 classes ahead of your soundscape just preparing all of those elements. You can also talk about dynamics and choices that you will make when you are creating something. Same in any composition that you're creating. What is the best sound? What is the best choice to do what I'm trying to do at this point in time in the story? So you can talk about musical choices and do some creating that way with your students. So one of the instruments that I use in my story is the cabasa. In my story, the giant eats some breakfast, and so does Sam actually, and so they're eating toast. And that's my toast eating sound. If you don't have a cabasa, you can use sandpaper blocks that rub together, or pool noodles, or you can use some found sounds like paper bags crumpling or Velcro shoes opening and closing. There must be some of those around in the classroom. And so those are all sounds that you can use to create, that's part of the sound for the soundscape. In my story, there's also a glass of juice that the giant drinks for his breakfast, and I've used a rain stick for that. So as long as the rain stick is raining, then the giant is drinking the juice. When you have these instruments being played by students, they will have some creative control, some creative decision making, because whoever's playing that rain stick can either let it go, and we all have to wait, or they might decide to let it go and stop it fast, and then we all have to stop drinking. So they have some creative control as to what's happening in the story, depending on how they're playing their instrument. If you're talking about vibration in an instrument, there are really great samples of this. I have this, which I use for going up the beanstalk and coming down the beanstalk, but it's all separate bars. I'm just move it because it's getting warm there by the fire. But the separate bars can be played, and you can hear how long that vibrates. This is made out of metal, so it will have a longer vibration, probably, not always, but probably, a longer vibration than something that's similar but made out of wood. And you can also talk about, if I stop that sound with my hand, that vibration will stop, so the sound stops. I also have an energy chime. This is a single chime, and it's suspended above this piece of wood. There's string around it, and it lasts for a long time. And again, you can stop that vibration, you can let it go to its natural end, but it will last for a long time, I will tell you that. I have certain words in the story that I have assigned an instrument to be played every time you hear that word. So one of those words is magic. One of those words is cow. You can also do mother and Sam in the story, but that's up to you. However, this is a great magic sound because it sounds sort of magical, shimmery. You can also add a tambourine to that. You could do a finger cymbal. Here's my finger cymbal tip for you. When you're using finger cymbals, I always give one finger cymbal per person and use a triangle beater, or a spoon, something metal, and you can use a pencil as well. It's not as loud. There's your timbre kind of thing. A pencil made out of wood or an eraser on a pencil will sound different than a metal on metal application. However, here's like a wet soccer sock that you're holding. Blah, I don't want to touch that. And you play the finger cymbal. I like this for two reasons. One, you can get twice as many students involved playing finger cymbals with your finger cymbal collection, and I don't have to deal with, little fingers going through the holes and then trying to play it like a big crash cymbal, which never works anyway, because that's not the right way to play it. When you are assigning instruments, I would recommend to have little groups if you've got an instrument that you know is going to play multiple times, so that each student in that group gets a chance to play, and then they pass to the next student, and then that student plays, they pass to the next student, and that student plays, and then probably no more than a group of 3. And so they have a chance to play. There's not as many instruments needed, and there's not as dense a sound when they do play, because everybody's going to get a chance, but it's not all at once. And so you can sort of maybe get everybody a chance to play an instrument at some point in time in your sound story with those small group assignments of instruments. Just a tip there. There's an instrument that I don't do in my story, but I wish I had, because it's one of my favorite instruments to play. This is a vibra slap. So the vibra slap is going to vibrate all the way through this metal into this chamber where there's little metal rods that vibrate against the wood. You're going to hold it here. On the video I watched for how to play this properly, the guide holds it there, but I find that really loose and wobbly with my littles, so we just hold it around the whole metal piece there, but that's it, and you hit that ball, and it's a very cool sound. So if I were going to retell my story, I would find something that Sam would do in the story to be able to include the vibra slap. Speaking of adding something in the story, when you're watching my storytelling video of this, if you decide to do that, it's just a sample for you so you can see me going into storytelling mode, but make the story your own. If you don't want to sell a cow, do something else. You got to keep the magic beans, because you kind of need to have something to grow that beanstalk. But when Sam climbs that beanstalk, all sorts of adventures could happen. Whatever you want to use, involve the students, ask them what they might see at the top of the beanstalk, and add that into the creative process, the storytelling, and the adding of instruments. You can also involve them, for instance, when I'm talking about the mother asking Sam what he got for payment for the cow. He hasn't told her yet, and so she says, oh, did you get pie and cake and cookies and that kind of stuff? You can ask the students, what would you like to get as items for payment for your cow if you went to the market? And it's a way to involve them, get them to connect with the story, and it's not a movement, body percussion instrument sound, but it is involving them with the creative process of creating that story. When you have finished and you go to the end, you can actually do a final, everybody plays. If they've been sitting and waiting and been very good at holding their instruments and not playing, they'll want one more chance to play. When you're doing anything with instruments that way, please, 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 please remember to create a stop signal. This is going to be really crucial, and it's best if it can be something that's a physical movement that they can see, as opposed to using your voice, which is hard for them to hear. So I will say, you're going to play. When I go like this, I'm taking the sound, it's going to disappear in my hand, and the sound will stop. So even if you haven't been directing them and they've started to play, when they see your hands go up, they know the sound is able to continue, and now it stops. So it's just a way to maintain some classroom control and not have just a cacophony of sound when they're making their instruments play for whatever part they're involved in. In my story, you will see I use a great big gathering drum for my giant. I love that drum. It's great, but you don't need a huge drum. This is just a small hand drum, and you can 3, 5, 4, 5. Again, this is when it's going to be very important to have that pre-sound story, soundscape class, because you can talk about dynamics when playing the drum. You can use fingernails. You can use louder sounds, but you're never going to use your fist through the middle of the drum. You're going to treat it with respect, and hopefully you will keep your instruments intact that way because they know the proper way to play them. So this is a really important precursor to handing out instruments to a whole lot of kids and having them play so they know what they're supposed to do with that instrument ahead of time. Adding sounds, body percussion, rhythm instruments, found sounds, whatever you're going to do, and creating a soundscape or a sound story is a wonderful activity to do with your students. You can devote a whole class to that, or you can do an end of class story just to wind down. You could do it in the middle of a class for a brain break. Those dramatized stories and soundscapes are really a great tool to have in your music teacher back pocket when you are working with students in your music classroom. Wherever you are, I hope you have a great day making music and make music a great part of your day.